The relationship that can exist between a grandparent and a grandchild is unique and powerful. It should be embraced and celebrated in a big way. That's why I created Grandparents Week, a full week celebrating and equipping grandparents with insights shared from world-class experts and thought leaders on becoming a more influential and cherished grandparent. Hi, I'm Aaron Larson, founder of GrandparentsAcademy.com, the first and only online academy dedicated to helping grandparents grow meaningful relationships and rich legacies with their loved ones from any distance. I'd like to personally invite you to Grandparents Week, starting on National Grandparents Day, Sunday, September 11th through Saturday, September 17th. I'm bringing together experts from all over the world to help you make the most of your special role as a grandparent. You'll hear a variety of interesting topics, including cultivating healthy cooking habits with grandchildren, becoming a fully engaged grandfather, nurturing strong and meaningful relationships from a distance, creating a photo legacy, and more. This is a virtual event, meaning you can watch these interviews and trainings online from the comfort of your home. And best of all, general admission is free. Our way of saying thanks to all grandparents out there for all that you do. Claim your ticket and come celebrate Grandparents Week with us by clicking the link in the show notes at the end of this episode. We hope to see you there.
Jim Marggaff is somebody who's passionate about helping people resolve problems. As we get into this conversation, you're going to learn about how Jim's new company, Kinoo, is using technology to create memorable interactions between adults and little kids. This is an interactive application where the little ones are going to get to hold a wand and participate and do all sorts of fun stuff. And I don't want to give too much away, but you're really going to enjoy this conversation. We're going to learn more about Jim's history and where he's got this passion for helping people solve problems and the methodologies behind some of that. So be sure to go to the show notes after you listen to this episode. Check on these links so that you can find out more about Jim's past, his present, as well as his ideas about problem solving. This is going to be a great conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on our show and talking about a fabulous new product that you've developed called Kinoo.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here, Greg, and look forward to telling you about Kinoo and how it came about and what we're seeing with it and the effect that it's having right now for parents, for grandparents, and for young children from 2 to 7 years of age.
Yeah, this is going to be an absolutely fun conversation. And one of the things that I'd like to do as we get going into it is talk a little bit about the background with some of the books and products that you've done prior to this, because I think there's a trend line or there's a theme that goes through some of your work, which is about problem solving and coming through and being adaptive to, I think in one of your TED Talks, you were talking about wallowing in the problem a little bit. And I love that because I think as kids with the creativity side and the ability to sit and puzzle over something, whether it's building blocks and puzzles or whatnot, that sometimes we lose some of that. So this is exciting to talk about this idea of helping young people with becoming entrepreneurs themselves and becoming better problem solvers, let's say.
Thanks, Greg. I couldn't agree more. I've spent my career founding companies using new technologies, and the most recent Kinoo, Kinoo, which by the way is kin, is in kinship, and kin, your kinfolk, and the two O's, if you see it on a logo, they're side by side and they form an infinity sign. So because we connect intergenerationally, old and young ones. So Kinoo But when it comes to problem solving, it's a favorite topic of mine. And to give a quick note of possible credibility for your audience, my son and I have a son and daughter, both of who are entrepreneurs right now. They're 27 and 29. And when my son was 18, he entered a concept he had that he developed after we did a lot of talking about problem solving for years into a science fair, and was entered into the Intel Science Fair, which you may know used to be called the Westinghouse Science Fair. And it was an idea for a treatment for cancer that he came up with, and he ended up winning the global prize among about 15 million kids around the world when he was 18, which is kind of considered Nobel Prize for science for a treatment for cancer, which I'd love to go into. But point is, I believe one can teach how to think, to revise and refine your thinking, and it can begin with a child as young as 3 years of age to develop problem-solving skills that will remain with you through life and will carry you forward in everything you do. And so I'd love to be sure we touch on that, because there's some points I could offer along the way. And of course, we're embedding this in what we're doing at Kinoo today.
Oh, absolutely. And what I liked too was that you've taken some of this and you folded it into a book, and that book's called How to Raise a Founder with Heart, a guide for parents to develop your child's problem-solving abilities. So it's not just with LeapPad and some of the other products that you've been involved in, but you've also put that down into a book that parents can take and then share with their children to help install that a little bit more, because I think we all need a little bit of help in knowing that, hey, it's okay to take risks. It's okay to look for those problems that you want to put into a bank, let's say, that you just kind of noodle on, and you just kind of think it over and you think it over. And then, it's one of those, you get out of the shower or you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, that's how we're solving that problem.
That's it. I call that your problem reservoir. And I teach people and young kids and Blake and Annie to always have 3 problems you carry with you at all times. You take them to bed, and you pick one and you think about it as you're falling asleep, and you wake up the next morning and you think about it again. And I can talk about how that all works. But the point is, you do want a reservoir of problems. You look for opportunities that are triggered by novelty, and to learn how to then collide thinking to solve those problems. But hopefully we'll touch on that too. But I guess let me ground that. The book came about because I had invented the Leapfrog LeapPad, and we helped roughly 100 million kids in a 5-year period. And the LeapPad ultimately was around 2000, and then for years after, but was in over 77% of households with kids from 4 to 7 years of age. And I built the focus testing facility at LeapFrog, and watched parents come in and looked at them struggle trying to figure out how to help develop their kids. And so I wrote this book. It's very accessible. I mean, by the way, the profits for the book are all donated to charity, so this is not money making for us. But it was considered a Forbes best first book for founders and entrepreneurs. So there's some credibility there. But it's full of simple stories and very easily written. It's very accessible, but gives guidance to both grandparents and parents on things they can do with their kids in a structured manner. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I love it, because I think sometimes as in this grandparent space, in this grandfather role that I'm learning, is that I'm always keeping my eyes out for, hey, where has this been solved before? Or where has somebody found a great way that I can install that idea of, whether it's the lemonade stand at the corner or whatnot, to be able to start to teach those kids those entrepreneurial skills and that ownership of their ideas.
Thank you. Well, it came to that. There's a little story here that ties a few things together already. This was about the time I'd already had the idea and was developing the LeapPad. And by the way, I pulled one out. This is kind of funny, but if anybody recalls, some of your viewers or your listeners may recall the LeapPad, and I'll turn it on, because when I turn it on, now you recognize the voice, and it will say, "Welcome to the LeapPad Learning System," or something like that, which I did now over 20 years ago. Let's see. Here we go.
Into learning.
Leap into learning. And it goes on from there. And my son's voice, he was the voice of Tad. And so here's what happened. I was developing activities for the LeapPad, all of which are based around emotional engagement, providing mastery to a child so that they get a sense of mastery when they're playing, and they're emotionally engaged in some story with some music, so you create a mood, and then you provide them control, so they have control over the experience. And if you merge these elements in an experience for a child, amazing things happen, and the child has a sense of personal development, growth, and they keep coming back to play. So Blake had gone with me to the studio repeatedly and recording the voice of Tad for about 6-7 years. And we were en route, and he was sitting, and I looked over at him, and I saw him sitting at this point. He was just ready to go out of his car seat and said, "Blake, what are you thinking?" What does a child say if you ask that question? I don't know. It's pretty universal. And so I said, here's what I'd like you to do. Now, I had just shown him recently, he had an affinity for tools. I built a little tool bench, and I'd shown him what an adjustable wrench was, where you can screw it and adjust the wrench size. And I said, you know that wrench? He said, yeah. And I said, I'd like you to think about how we could make it a wrench that was easier to use even than that wrench. He looked at me. He had never seen a ratchet wrench before, where it goes click, 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 and you go back. So that was not part of his mental model. So I said, think about this. And then I said, I'd like you to come up with 2 other problems you'd like to think about on your own. And I want you to keep these 3 problems in your mind. And then nighttime, I'd go in and I'd ask him what his 3 problems were. And I'd sit at night, before he'd go to sleep, and I'd say, pick one and think about it. I'd check in with him morning, and I'd teach him to think about it again. Because when you do keep problems in your head, you don't know when the solution will present itself. But it often does so when you see something novel that's really, really completely novel to you, and you can train yourself to take something novel, abstract it into a model, and then slam that abstraction against the problem that you're carrying, pull one off the shelf out of the 3, slam it together. And I just had the honor recently of receiving my 60-second patent. So I've been writing IP for some time. And what I find is I hope to do another book that codifies how to innovate, how to invent, because there's processes you can take to apply. And what I've just defined are the elements of that process. And as I said before, that led Blake to go on and recognize that one day that he read about iron inert metal particles near a radiation in a nuclear power plant, and learned that when they're exposed to radiation, they produce secondary radiation called the Compton scattering effect. And when that happens, the radiation local to that metal is more toxic than the radiation that's generally radiated. He said, whoa, what if we were to take that idea and we could inject tin particles, inert metal, in a breast tumor and then irradiate that, and we could produce local higher toxicity radiation. We could improve the treatment of breast cancer. And he came up with that, and he built a model for it, and that's what he entered in the Intel Science Fair that won him the total global prize, the Gordon E. Moore Award. So tying that all together, leapfrog learning, communication, methods of learning, with also methods of problem solving that you can apply and teach to children. And one other piece that's so critical, what we've identified more recently with this idea for Kinoo, is that if we involve another human being and we guide them on how to talk to that child at just the right time and just the right way, in a way that's friendly to that person, we can amplify the learning and engagement and the emotional connection, and everything wins. And that happens with intergenerational connection via video chat in a Kinoo session. A grandparent connects via video chat with Kinoo in our system, but we then prompt the grandparent with things to say and do while they're playing games that are little messages that are contextually relevant, such as, they're baking a cake, or they're making cookies together, and we may give a little nudge that says that stirring the batter introduces air that makes the cookies fluffier. So we do things like that as well.
Oh, that's great. And I love the idea of the activities for the grandparents and the parents on there, because sometimes even with me and my soon-to-be 4-year-old grandson, we get on the call, it's, hey, how are you doing? What's going on today? That sort of thing. And with those little kids, that conversation can quickly dry up. Or in the case of my grandson, he just wants to start pushing buttons, whether it's on the laptop or whatever, right? So I love the idea that you guys have come up with a device that the grandkids can hold and is interactive with that. I've been reading too that you guys are now being able to record that the conversations are lasting about 10 times longer than without using some of the prompts and the devices that are found in Kinoo.
Yeah, we call it, if you remember, some listeners may recall, back decades ago, there was a fervor in the United States when adults and the government realized that our kids weren't learning how to read. And that led to the LeapPad, among other things. And they called it the Johnny problem. Johnny can't read. So we took that and said, we have another Johnny problem today. And the problem goes like this, as you described, Greg. You get on a call, a Zoom call, a FaceTime call, a phone call with your young loved one. So grandmother's on with Johnny, and Johnny's 4. And she says, hey, Johnny, how are you? Good. What are you up to? Nothing. And Johnny runs off. And mom goes after Johnny with her smartphone. She chases him around with the camera. And grandma feels just hurt, negligent. She feels like she doesn't know how to speak to him, or frustrated, worse. And the whole thing just devolves. And this happens every day around the country over and over again. And we saw this. We did testing and we talked to grandparents and said they want to be close. They want to feel relevant. They want to contribute to those grandkids. They want to play with them and laugh with them. And they want to know that they're doing something that's valuable for the grandchild and that it's personal. They also want to know when they're on, because we considered a first model and we said, gee, what if we just take games and drop them into a video chat, or drop a book into a video chat? Well, we looked, and some companies had done this. And the challenge you have is if you just drop a book into a video chat, or tic-tac-toe or checkers, what does the child do? Their attention, first of all, for checkers or tic-tac goes where their finger is. They focus on the game. It doesn't matter that another person is there. The video becomes gratuitous. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's grandma or grandpa or a piece of software that they're playing with. So what we said is we need to be sure that our play is co-play. What that means is designed explicitly to feature the grandparent, to engage them in the eyes, literally the eyes of the grandchild, so that they're there doing something. So instead of just the child saying, hey, I want to play checkers, they say, can I canoe with Grammy? Or can I canoe with Grampy? Because they know that means they're thinking about canoeing, which means a whole different level of co-play and interaction with that grandparent, and they're thinking about the grandparent. They're picturing them, they can see them, they can't wait to play because they know they're getting to know that grandparent. They're talking to them about things that are relevant. And that makes the difference. When you achieve that in a family, the parent realizes it because all of a sudden, the parent knows that grandparent has a connection with the grandchild. And we have grandparents, granddads, we've been told by grandmoms, a grandmom said, do you know, I saw my husband making a face on a video call and giggling with his grandson. I haven't seen him do that ever. And so we get these feedback because we bring play and joy and fun into these games. So they both have a role. They both play together.
Yeah.
And that's part of the magic of Kinoo.
And I love that because as a long distance grandfather, this type of activity is something that really creates that bond. So when I show up on site, I'm my grandson or my granddaughter's playmate, right? You know, I'm the grandparent, but I'm also the playmate on Kinoo. And then we're not starting off as strangers where they haven't seen me for months and having to reestablish a relationship again when we show up on site. It's, hey, you know, my buddy from Kinoo, let's say, is now here at the house and we get to play in person. So I think that's just fantastic to keep us both engaged.
That's exactly it, because when, first of all, the child will recognize you because they'll see you on video, because they will really see you. We move the video around the screen. We put two of you together in a rocket ship on your side as it's blasting off. Then it blasts off and we tilt it up so you can see each other. But before we do that, we have you take your space passport photographs. One of them is both smiling, one of them is both making a silly, goofy face, and one of them is making a big, wide O mouth surprise face where you're going, oh! And those three different faces cause the adult to laugh. When the grandparent laughs, the child laughs. So that's just taking the passport. Then on the way to the moon, and when you land on the moon and do a moon dance, we drop those different faces live sometimes, and the snapshots we've taken into the rocket or into your astronaut helmet, and you see the face there. You see it appear, and when you're dancing to music, you're going up and floating down with no gravity or leaning from side to side, and the face changes, and now you're paying attention to each other. You're looking in each other's eyes, you're looking at each other's face, and of course, as you land on the moon, along comes a prompt that says, that's looking back at the Earth and says, do you think we could have peace on Earth? I don't see any lines for any countries there, which gives the opportunity to talk about a map and countries. And gee, how this whole big blue orb is just one shared world, and we all need to be part of this together. So we bring in life skills as well as some high concepts that can be introduced to a child as young as 3 or 4.
Oh, that's fun. And what I like about it too is that you guys do have that somewhat of the problem solving piece into this. I think where one of the games is, you've got some of the matching games and you've got some of the other things where it does, I don't know, challenge may not be the right word, but maybe it is the right word. Challenges a youngster to go, hey, where's the two objects that look the same? A basic memory type game or matching game.
Yeah. I just pulled off my bookshelf. You just triggered a book that was published in 1984. The book is called, I'll hold it up so you can see it. It's called Pattern Thinking. And humans' intelligence is a function of our ability to identify patterns, to make matches. We're wired evolutionarily to do this. This has been proven many times over. If I say to you 2, 4, 6, you can't help but think 8.
Right.
I know what's going on in your brain at that point. If I show you 3 objects, small, bigger, and then there's another one, a choice, you will want to put that in. Okay, so we can guide people on patterns and on pattern recognition. Now, one of the best ways to teach, and we did this extensively at Leapfrog, and we're doing this at Kinoo as well. And it's just fun for the child because matching patterns is extremely satisfying. There's dopamine release. Both adults and kids actually enjoy finding patterns together. So there's one game which is called Snow Match, and there are snow creatures. And on one side is the creatures for the child, and the other side are the creatures for the grandparent. In the middle is a box. And either one can go first. So the grandparent picks a snow creature that has arms with 3 fingers on each side and maybe a scarf on it, and it has eyes that are orange, and it has a different shaped hat. And the other child has to look through all the snow people and find the snow creature that has those matching attributes. Now you say, okay, so what? Well, it's a big deal because for a child learning how to systematically take their eyes, move from one item to the next, start to identify the attributes like the arms, the hat, the eyes, the scarf, to look at those, to then systematically know how to look for them to match them, is one of the early developmental aspects of fundamentally raw intelligence. You want a smarter child, you help them develop the means to be able to identify patterns. You develop these skills that then are wired in their brain. They don't even know they have them over time. You've made a smarter child. Just flat out known.
Yeah, well, and that reminds me of, and I forget those magazines that we used to have in the dentist office and doctor's office. If you remember, they're like little kid magazines, but they would have in the backs of them those matching games where, hey, we're all analog here. We got thrown into the digital. So, I remember with my mom, I'd love to get my hands on those magazines when I was a kid because they did have those types of games. It was, hey, this snowman looks like this snowman, but this one is different because it's got 3 fingers versus 4 fingers. Or this one's missing a scarf or, that sort of thing. And I loved it. I didn't know why I loved it, but now this makes sense.
That's why you loved it, Greg. I can tell you we developed what you can identify basic patterns of behavior. They're called play patterns in kids. And adults might look at them as work or learning. To a child, they're one of our co-founders, Mark Schlichting, created Living Books. And he wrote a book called, it's on play, understanding, and kids design. It's the best book ever written on the topic. But he describes a child sitting at a beach, grabbing a handful of sand and letting it fall through their fingers. When that occurs, that child is measuring the weight. They're looking at the rate at which the sand is falling. They're looking at the reflection and how sticky it is. They're feeling it against their skin. They pick it up and they do it again. To you, it just looks like the child's just playing with sand. They're a scientist. They're making observations about how it changes. So back to the comment about the magazine, quite uncanny. That magazine was called Highlights for Kids.
Right.
And I say it's uncanny because 3 hours ago, I was on a Zoom with the CEO of Highlights for Kids, Kent Johnson, talking to him about what his mission is, what our mission is, the commonality we have in these, and whether we might be able to work together, because he gets it. He knows what it means. And you just summed it up. When you said you enjoyed it, you didn't know why. Kids enjoy this. You give them the right play, they love it. And now you add in the grandparent that gets to watch and make prompts, and you guide them, and you have the best, you have an explosive opportunity for growth, relationship, and development.
Well, and one of the important things too that you're talking about on with Kinoo is the ability to build these relationships with grandchildren when they're early, because I'm always a little bit focused about where my kids or grandkids are going to be further down the road. When they hit those preteen years, when they hit the teenage years, and things start to go sideways for kids. They're now, do I have the right jeans on? Do I have the right t-shirt? Am I listening to the right music? And where grandparents, I think, can really play a strong role is being that mentor and that advocate and that confidant with them, where they don't want to take some of the insecurities or troubles that they have at school or in life. But if grandparents have that relationship with the grandchildren, they may be willing to come to me with some of those things, and I can help them out with some of that versus having it remain quiet and then having those problems come up. But I know that we have to have those relationships built early if we're going to be able to maximize our influence later down the road.
I completely agree so much, because I grew up with my grandparents. I had a maternal grandmother who was my close friend. I mean, grandmother, when I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, she lived in our house until I was about 12 or so, and then stayed close with me through high school and through college and right on until she died. And she has a special place in my heart always. We could talk about anything. I could tell her. We just had that relationship. So at Kinoo, the key there is we grow, our activities grow with the child and the relationship. So some of it is just self-identifying, but we guide the parents on things to do and what, so they know, or grandparents. So what they know how it works. But the main thing is to be sure that they're enjoying one another in a session. And as you said before, typically a Zoom call, a FaceTime call is 2 or 3 minutes, and the child's just not interested. They don't want to stare at a talking head on a screen that's saying, how are you? How was your week? They just don't know what to say. So by adding the play and making it true co-play, and let's talk about the physical element in just a moment, because we've added a physical component to this, which is completely game-changing. But when they do, and that grows, our expectation is that we will continue to support that relationship by providing the right type of activities and exchanges and dialogue for decade plus to come, right on through 7 years old to 10 years old to 12 years old, because you want someone you can speak to. And for us, it's about knowing how to guide the conversation. It's about how to prompt, because we call it asymmetric asynchronous. In other words, we give a little private prompt to the grandmother that appears as text, or sometimes Cody says something to the child that the grandparent can't hear. We have, by the way, in our chat, we have a character I mentioned before. The character's there. They guide the conversation to make it easy. So other point too, some grandparents may be listening who are maybe a bit older, a bit more afraid of technology. Our solution is an app. It's just an app that you download. You connect with the child's parent. But let's get on to that next piece of it. We include a wand. We call a Kinoo wand. It's kind of a magic wand just for the child, The grandparent doesn't have one. They just have their app. And when the adult has this wand, or the child has this wand in their hand, the wand has 3 glowing lights on it that change color, any color, full spectrum of rainbow colors. And they change lights, and they sync. It also has a speaker in it, and it responds to the child's movement in conjunction with what they're playing. So put simply, the child and the grandparent want to make cookies together, which is a great thing to do when you're close, but not so easy when you're across the screen. So we create a virtual kitchen. There it is. You both see it. The ingredients appear on the shelf. There's some flour. There's some butter. There's some vanilla. There's some eggs. And the child has in their hand this tool. And what happens, the grandparent, there's a big bowl. The grandparent with their finger, they drag over the flour above the bowl. And the child takes this wand. It's about 3 inches, very small, fits ergonomically in their hand. I'm holding one right now. There's lights and sound that come on. And when they do, and they pour it, they tilt it, the flour pours into the cup. And the next thing that happens, the grandma brings over an egg. She drags it with her friend and her finger, and the child takes the wand, and there's little prompts to do this or messages, and they crack it. They go crack, 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 and they do it really fast. They just slam the wand in the air like they're cracking an egg, and they see the egg cracking. And then comes over the vanilla, and they pour the bottle of vanilla in. And then when it's time, they take the wand and they move it in the air in a big circular motion or any way they want to, and they whisk the batter all together, and it changes from all these lumpy ingredients to a real nice brown batter, and then they pour in more ingredients. Then they pull it out, they scoop it out with a wand in their fingers, they put it on a cookie tray, pop it in the oven, wait for it to time out, and bring them out, and they eat them all up together. And that happens, nobody's ever done anything like that. It feels as though you're really together, and you're talking about it as you're going. And you're using the wand, just the child, with what's called augmented reality.
Well, and I'm sure moms love it because there's not a big mess in the kitchen afterwards.
That's right. And there are little tips along the way about, why to use butter and why to use vanilla, and fun music as you're going along as well. And they both just stay engaged, and they want to come back and play. Yeah. And it's always fun to watch to see how the child at the end, whether they share the cookies or whether they gobble them down. And of course, we give prompts to the adult to teach them how to message. It's good to share. Is it okay if I have one? Rather than saying, no, don't do that. I don't do, because some grandparents get a little grumpy. And we want to just say, hey, be patient. Let the child learn. You can guide them to learn what it feels like to share. And so all these little messages that are just there privately for the grandparent to decide. And by the way, the messages appear on the screen on their own sometimes. And other times we call them light bulb moments. And on the grandparent's screen on their tablet, there's a light bulb sitting there. And if it glows yellow and they touch it, a prompt appears that's a sentence. Just a little simple sentence, simple message. This sounds like it may be complex. It is completely easy to use. It just works. We know a lot about user interface design and interaction. And kids and grandparents just adore playing.
And that's such a great idea. And I'm sure there's other games, lack of a better word, interactions that grandparents can use. For the example you gave with the cookies, is I might do that a week before I go up to Virginia to go see my grandkids, and we make virtual cookies. And then when we get on site, it's, hey, we're going to make cookies with grandma and grandpa and Charlie, then we'll be able to do it. And, so it prompts those on-site activities and interactions as well. So that's one of the things that I really like about what I'm learning about the product, is that it's not the replacement, it's the augmentation of that relationship. It's especially when I don't live in the same neighborhood, I can't walk up the street and see the grandkids, but we can do these activities and I can help them learn and process through, their own problem solving at age appropriate levels. That also kind of prompts me to ask the question is, how did you build up and get a team together to put this, create these activities, create the interactions, and what was some of the activities that went on with getting this together? Well,
yeah, it's interesting because this after I mentioned a number of companies I started. So I did out of college, did a wide area network and telecommunications company. Then I wanted to teach the world geography. So I with my MIT roommate, we made a sphere that was touch responsive on a base with some electronics. So we made a talking globe, which ultimately sold millions of units around the world. So you could touch anywhere on the world and hear audio, tens of thousands of facts about the world, or trace the Mississippi River with a pen. So I was watching that work and observed that we could take that same technology from this sphere, flatten it out, put paper on it, teach kids to read. And I saw my son playing with this, and my daughter was just barely able to hold a pen, but said we could teach this. And that led me to then selling Explore to Leapfrog, merging with Mike Wood and creating the LeapPad. And from there, I created a pen for kids called a Fly Pen Top that would allow kids to write on paper, and they could write a word and it would speak it aloud, just writing a device, electronic device. From there, I founded another company for adults but also kids use this too, called Livescribe, to make a smart pen. And with the pen, a child or an adult could be in a meeting and take notes, and the pen would record while they're writing on paper. A pen, physical pen I'm holding, go write on paper, and the pen would optionally record audio, synchronizing it with the ink while they were writing on paper. So you could have a notebook full of notes and go back to page 3, line 2, and touch a specific glyph of ink right where you wrote it. And the pen would index in and start playing the audio from the instant you wrote that stroke. So you could hear what was spoken when you took that note. And then, of course, you could see it on your computer or your mobile device, and you could replay the ink. You could play the ink as a movie and then hear the audio with it as well. So from there, I happened to meet a neurologist who was working with people locked in, who had developed wearable eye tracking technology to help people with ALS and other neurological disorders. And I said, wow, what if we could let you control what you see with your eyes, in addition to helping somebody with ALS type by just dwelling on letters? I said, what if we could create a visual language that lets you move your eyes around to basically do anything you might do with your finger on a smartphone or on an iPad, just by tapping, scrolling, panning, activating, but just with your eyes in either AR or VR. So I had this idea, and I took the technology, built another company called iFluence in 2013, and we made it work. We transformed intent into action through your eyes in 60 seconds so that a person could put on a headset and they could navigate, activate, buy things, send email messages just by looking at a display in front of their eyes. And sold that company. I sold that to Google in 2016. So this came about when my wife decided to go back to school at USC late in life, and she wanted to help astronauts, specifically NASA, with astronauts deal with long duration spaceflight and isolation. Now, what does that have to do with pens and globes and wireless communications and LeapPad? Well, I wasn't sure, but I know we talked a bit, and I said, I think what we need is a way to connect two people separated by time and space. What if we could connect them? And I threw out a term. I said, what if we make an AI social agent, an artificially intelligent social agent? Because I've written a lot of IP. So I started to pursue this and then said, okay, we have to overcome space and time, because if you're at Mars, you're 20 minutes away one way and 20 minutes back. So it takes a long time for light to travel. So we had to deal with space and time. But then I said, if we could make this work for NASA, what could we do for people on Earth who are socially isolated? And that led to looking at grandparents. And specifically grandparents, when I started to speak to them, they said, yep, what we really want, we want to be connected to our grandkids. And we want to be connected to our young grandkids while we can still make a difference and have them connect with us. So that led to this whole idea of Kinoo. And the whole journey, my whole life's journey across all these companies has been, again, looking at how to engage people, how to empower them, how to help people communicate and learn. And now we're doing it again with intergenerationally, with Kinoo, and doing this in a whole new way that's both what we call kinetic, because the child moves, and they play together with co-play. And so we got this system. So the last piece to answer your question, I tapped the people I knew. I went to the best creators of kids content, kids educational material, kids development, developmental growth, and tapped the best minds in the world. And we tapped the best people that have written books. The best book I mentioned before, Mark Schlichting, and people from Berkeley, from Samsung, from Google, and basically it built a team of designers. We design our own content. We design, just like LeapPad, we design activities that work for kids. They work for grandparents. We've cracked the code of co-play, and we've done this with a physical device. So the child gets to take their wand, and when grandpa wants to take that child fishing, the child pulls the wand back, casts it out in midair, just the wand, and grandpa sees the line on his screen. He sees the line go in the water and the hook drop down. It's a soft hook, of course. And he moves a fish with his finger over on, he hooks it on, and the child sees a fish on the hook, and they pull the wand back and they pull it out. And the fish goes up in the air, and if it's a starfish, it goes, twinkle, twinkle, little star, and it dances and it hops off the hook. Or it, if it's a clownfish, it tells a joke. And the jokes are just kid jokes, kid funny jokes. And there's always surprises, always music, always emotion, and always engagement for the grandparent and the grandchild. So they just want to keep coming back and play 30 or 40 minutes at a time.
That's awesome. I know right now that Kinoo is working on the iOS accounts. Do you have a roadmap or features and when it might be for Android or other devices?
We do. It's coming. It turns out, everyone in the engineering business knows that starting with iOS is so much easier because there's just one platform. When you go to Android, you have to make it work across different phones and tablets, and they all vary. It'll be next year. Unfortunately, it won't be before Christmas, but we've had, I can say, not to be self-serving, but we've had families that want this so badly they bought an iPad for their grandchild or for themselves just because they can play with it. And Apple, of course, likes this, so that's good news. But it is, and again, it's just very, very easy to use. It's the grandparent and the parent download an app. They register. The parent invites the grandparent. They're connected, and they just push a button. Who to call? They call up Johnny, and they play.
Yeah. No, I'm just loving it. Every time I'm diving in on your website and learning more and looking at some of the reviews, I'm now chomping at the bit myself a little bit to get in there and get my grandson hooked up with this. So I'm looking forward to it. Jim, we've had you on for a little while. Is there anything about Kinoo that we haven't talked about, or anything about problem solving that you might want to address before we wrap this up?
Thanks. I think my message is that oftentimes, having worked at Leapfrog and watched as we grew and evolved the LeapPad, I watched parents and also grandparents with a great deal of uncertainty about what role they would play and how they could really affect the well-being of their grandkid. And as you know, parents' number one concern for that 2 to 5 year old is making sure that they get that child ready for school, and ready in a couple ways. One is that they can read their letters, they can decode simple words, they can begin to do it. They really want to do this, so they can go cat. They know some numbers, but also they're ready for what are called life skills. So that parent wants to be sure that when they drop that child off on their first day of kindergarten, first day of first grade, and then first day of second grade, that child is ready, and they know they've done everything possible to give that child the biggest opportunity for success. And we saw parents, it's okay for parents, you can give yourself permission to do this. It's all right. And grandparents, the key there is grandparents are sometimes unsure about what to get, what to give, and how to connect with their grandchildren. And we know some are cautious. Let me mention screen time, because screen time, there's always this concern about screen time. Be very clear, the American Association of Pediatrics does not declare video chat as screen time. It is not the same. Just categorically, video chat is not screen time. So they have explicit guidance around how much screen time a child should get, but video chat, because there's another human being on the other end of it, it is not considered screen time. It's considered developmentally wonderful, strong. It's connection building. And a child as young as 18 months can recognize another person. They can recognize, you know this already, you can recognize a grandparent under 2 years. And further, the child can tell the difference of whether that person is alive or a video. They can tell the difference. So the reactiveness of that person. So as such, the AAP, American Association of Pediatrics, for any grandparents or parents that are concerned about screen time, video chat is not screen time. The AAP supports and endorses it and says this is fine for you to do. So just want to reinforce that point, because that always comes up. The two questions that come up for all the time, is screen time okay? And we say this is not screen time. It's video play, co-play with motion and physical activity, gets your child up and moving, number one. The second one is it hard? Is it hard to use? Is the technology threatening? And the answer is no. It's download 2 apps, connect, register, connect, and the child has the wand. And the parent just goes, they click once, it's Bluetooth, it gets set up, and then the grandparent just plays. They just have a blast.
Oh, that's.
And I've mentioned anything about, I don't know if you want to say anything about pricing and availability. Should we say something?
Let's go. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. So it's available. So Kinoo is available right now on our website, kinoo.com. You can go there. It's direct to consumer, immediately available. The list price for the wand for the child with lifetime free access to a growing library of activities is $99 for life. You get the wand and you get activities for life. Now, beyond that gives you, for your first month or so, you get unlimited time. After that, it's an hour for every month that you can play. If you're finding that you want more time than that, because an hour just isn't as much, you can think of it like a movie ticket. For price of movie ticket, I'll just say you can have unlimited time. So a typical movie with a grandchild is two plus hours, but you get unlimited time, not just 2 hours. You get as much time as you want every month. And we have people that stick with it. But you get that, all the activities, and there are occasional discounts. You can check out the website now. We're trying different promotions to see what seems to be the right price. And that, by the way, yeah, it's $10 a month after that if you want unlimited time. But the starting point for $99 or less is lifetime access with the wand and activities.
Oh yeah, well, and that sounds really reasonable to get in and get going with that, learn it, and then, my guess is you probably have a high conversion rate over to that unlimited monthly plan.
We do. It's strikingly high. Once people play with this with their grandkids, they're not going to stop. I mean, they find that because it's just joy and learning, and it's not an accident. It's really, really well, deeply considered with a great team that really cares hugely about our future of this planet, our future of our families, and the future of kids. And having done this once before early in my career, and now circling back to do this intergenerationally, as I said, I hadn't planned to do another company, but I think what we're doing is just so critically important in this world to give this to parents and families and kids, the gift of learning, the gift of play, the gift of confidence, the gift of problem solving, and to develop these skills. I can't think of anything that I'd rather be doing.
I think one of the great things about what you're doing, and from what I've known about the past, is this idea of, hey, we've got all this great IP stuff and we've got all this great technology we're pushing forward, but it's pushing it forward with the kids in mind and with developing them and developing their skill set and what they need for the 21st century, and making sure that the families and those connections aren't lost either.
That's it. We call it, we have academic skills, literacy and numeracy, life skills, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and there's a whole set of additional terms around as well, and 21st century skills, robustness, resilience, working together as a team. There's a whole set of basic, we have a scope and we have a guide set of skills that we build into our activities methodically, so they can grow with the child. And you'll see this if you play some activities. They just naturally grow, and there's more and more levels we're putting in to make them available for different ages and stages for the child.
Sure. And folks, again, the website is kinoo.com. I will go ahead and put the links in the show notes as well. So if you're out driving around or you start thinking canoe like the boat on the water, you can jump over and you can get connected that way in case you forgot or you don't have something to write down with. So, and Jim, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for educating us about this product and, the wonderful ways that long distance grandparents can use this tool to connect and build relationships with those young grandchildren. I just really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Greg. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks for your great questions and guidance. Appreciate it.
Jim had so many great ideas. I loved connecting with him, and I loved being able to talk about Kinoo, talk about what led up to this new business that he's gotten into that's really helping to build connections between adults and children that are remote from each other. I enjoyed hearing about how he encourages people to have a problem reservoir, where we just have 3 problems kind of noodling around in our heads. We don't have to be necessarily active in the sense of writing things down and working on those problems, to keep just thinking about it, and then wait for that moment of inspiration to come to you. I thought that was a great example and something that we can use as grandfathers and grandparents with our grandchildren. We can use that same approach to help them with some of the problems that they're coming up with. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I've got links to Kinoo and to Jim's TEDx talk, as well as some other links in the show notes. So be sure to go to cool-grandpa.us, check out the show notes, and then click on these links and learn more about Kinoo. I'm sure you're going to love it, and I'm sure those grandkids are going to love it. So remember, until next time, to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.